I thought this was a pretty good use of time to kind of show you the other capabilities of information delivery, how content could basically be delivered through the form of email, file system, FTP. A couple of output handlers or process actions that are available within the BI platform. Okay, so I can see I love action sequences. That's something that, for some reason, I really grown attached to my 3 years at Pentaho. For those who are not aware of what an action sequence is, it is a small, lightweight component that is part of the BI platform that basically allows you to orchestrate, access data, execute, integrate many different options without having to really be a Java developer. My background is in web-based development, and I'm more of a cut-and-paste programmer. Extensive knowledge in Pentaho technologies, and I'm able to exploit action sequences to their fullest to do a lot of different quote-unquote technical things that are within the Pentaho BI platform. In this session, we're going to cover the output handler beans, just kind of point them out to you to show you where they are within the Pentaho BI suite. They're located in the Pentaho object spring.xml file. By default, in previous versions of the Pentaho BI suite, they were not enabled, or some of them were not even present. They had to be entered manually. They are now by default enabled in this file, so we're going to look at those in depth. While we are in the Pentaho object spring.xml, I'm going to just bring up a best practice for basically easier iterations of action sequences by switching to the file-based repository. Those are for those who are not aware of that, when you edit or create action sequences, you're doing it at the file system level. The default installation of Pentaho uses a solution repository in the form of a database and requires refreshes every time you make changes. So when you're developing, it kind of can get annoying. So you might want to switch to this file base. So we're going to point that out. Then show you creation of the action sequence to write a report to the BI server file system, basically wherever the file system is, or access to the file systems. Could be network file shares as well. And that's utilizing the output handler known as file that is set up in that Spring Objects XML file. Action sequence to write a report to an FTP server utilizing VFS FTP output handler. And of creating an action sequence to send a report to email. This is not the only way this could be achieved, but it is another flexible and extensible object that we can use with the action sequence. Okay. So what I'm going to do to start out is go into the Pentaho object spring.xml file. So
Before you get started, let me just point out that if anybody has questions during the presentation, type them into the chat window to all participants, and I'll interrupt Mike to get them answered during the session. I'll also be monitoring the IRC channel, #Pentaho on Freenode, and then afterwards we'll also do kind of an open Q&A session.
Okay, thanks, Doug. So the default installation of the Pentaho server, your directory structure may vary. Please realize I am on the sales side, and we do demonstrate EE, but I also give back to the community by doing things such as this, and also utilizing the pre-sales tools page and the pre-sales consulting portal, which we can bring up at the end, or Doug can provide those links. In the directory structure, you just go to the root of the Pentaho Solutions directory. And in the Pentaho Solutions directory, there's a system directory. In the directory, there's a file called Pentaho object spring.xml. And you can bring it up and edit it with whatever editor you choose. And you basically see this is a Spring file, defines how system objects are created and managed within the BI server. So each object is responsible for different componentry within the BI server. The one that I wanted to mention first is switching from relational to file-based repository. Now, it's not something you would do in a production-type application. It's more for development purposes. You do switch from relational to file-based. You do lose security and control of the ACL voters and stuff that are going to control objects and stuff through permissioning. But for iterations of development, where you want to edit something quickly, test it, without having to constantly refresh after every change, switching over to file-based solution is the way to go. And I'll point out to you that you have these beans. You can see you have your iSolution engine, iSolution repository. By default, you can see that it says uncomment the following line to use file system. Well, I switched this, but basically you will have the DB base solution active. Okay, what you're going to hear is just comment it out using your standard comment XML syntax, and then uncomment the file system-based one, which is the bean ID file-based solution repository. Doing so will then allow you to basically just, when you save and restart the BI server, any manual change to the solution repository file system files, such as .xml files, maybe for Mondrian schemas, .xaction files for sequences, and even using Report Designer and saving directly the PRT file to the solution directory without having to publish every time. If you have that set up, utilizing file system, allows iterations and quicker development of seeing and recognizing your changes. Okay, so a quick best practice when developing with Pentaho. While here, I am going to point out a couple other things. I am planning on doing some other future community events showing you some of the audit file entry and audit relational entries and stuff that we have. You'll see here's the audit entry. I've actually switched this to file. That means it logs all of my entries and act points through Power BI server. It actually writes it to a file. By default, it writes it to a SQL database in Hibernate. So this is other ways of enhancing performance and also tweaking things. So I just want to point that out. Skipping down, you're going to see these other bean IDs, file, SFTP. These are now enabled by default within the Pentaho BI server, and you can now reference these as output handlers in action sequences. So if you write content in some form or fashion to FTP or to a file system, they are enabled for you. If you have security concerns or you have concerns about using these, then obviously you can just uncomment them out and don't use them. Okay, and we have other methods for distribution. So that was the Pentaho object Spring.xml. That was the discussion of the best practice, switching to file system, and also showing you the beans that are set up for the output handlers. What I want to show you is something that we enabled in version 3.5.2 for distribution. And the reason for this is I don't want anybody on the call to think that is the only way to distribute through email is by creating an action sequence. So I am going to show you what's been introduced in version 3.5.2 with subscription-based scheduling. So my administration console, okay, now there is a piece in here that we provide an enterprise edition for configuration. I'm just going to show you where it is in the console, and I'm going to show you where it is in the file system. Underneath configuration, BI components, you have email server settings. These are actually directly related to the email or SMTP email folder, email config. Okay. So in order to do some of the things I'm going to show you to do, if you're going to do email, you need to make sure your email component is set up. Okay. So in the community version, you're going to modify your email config, and you're going to set the appropriate parameters for the host name, the port, protocol, security, etc. Stop your BI server, restart. Now you have your email settings set up. And the reason for that is you log into the user console, you'll have an additional option when using what's called subscriptions or public schedules. Okay. So another feature that I believe is part of, actually that is in, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the scheduler is part of the community edition, correct? Okay. So in the CE version of the admin console, you have the option to set up schedules. You have what's called private and public schedules. A public schedule is basically a subscription-based schedule for prior versions of our software, meaning that you can attach a action sequence or a PRPT to run and be put in the content repository by default. And the content repository is another way of storage of the reports that have been run. But we've also introduced the ability to have that now email on demand. Okay? So,
hey, Mike?
Yes.
Can you set your resolution a little lower? I'm getting a couple people that are having trouble actually seeing stuff. Or especially when you're on those configuration pages, you know, bumping the font up or something.
How's that?
Still refresh.
Okay. You should see it now. Okay. So
yeah, that's better.
Okay. So I did a couple of public schedules here. Okay, I have one called generic public schedule. It is running every day at 12 a.m. every weekday. I have another one called finance public schedule, and that is it basically runs for a different group. But just to focus on these particular schedules, these are all public schedules, and these are available to be flagged for subscription within the user console. So into the user console, any of these reports that we provide, okay, the inventory report, that traffic lighting based report that shows inventory levels, have your parameter panel. I could actually go into this report now, right click, go to properties, go to advanced, and check to use these public schedules. And when you do so, you basically assign these, and these now will be enabled in the scheduling option when I click and schedule. And this allows me now to schedule with parameters and not make this available in the content repository, but also get available in an email form. Now, I will tell you, there is a known issue in 3.5.2. It's been fixed in 3.6, but HTML reports do not distribute to email automatically. That's a bug that's been fixed, so I'm going to use PDF. And in this particular instance, I'm just going to use, let's say, classic cars. Call it classic cars, email to, and you can see if the email setting has been set up, you will get this dialog to put in your email address, and then you can select from those public schedules that have been set up. And then I click schedule. It puts it in what's called the content repository. You know I have my classic cars, generic public schedule. Here's the content repository that I could execute and keep archive views or point-in-time views of the data, but also manage my schedules. In this case, I'm just going to click Run Now, and a number of different items attached to this. So it's going to kick off a number of different reports. But in this case, not only will this be available in my content repository, but now it could be available in my email inbox. And there's that classic card. Okay, so this is those who are going to be interested in the topics I'm going to discuss today, but also to show you there is a much easier way to do self-service type scheduling to email. The way I'm going to show you later is for more programmatic reasons and creating more advanced processes where you might want to include an email component in your BI process. Okay. That basically covers coding, non-technical approach, emailing and distributing information through email. The thing I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you these examples I prepared, and we will make these examples available. I have a report created with a report designer. Keep in mind, this is not a session on report designer. This is a session on action sequences kicking off existing reports created with the report designer. So very simple query, very simple layout that's been created with the Pentaho designer going against our sample data source. Okay, got also some parameters in it. Okay, show you that this is kind of live. I just changed this and called the sample report for Mike. I can execute, Okay, and you'll also notice that this report is saved directly to the file system. So if I change it, I just click Save. That PRPT is automatically updated in my solution. I don't have to go in and publish or refresh the repository, one or the other. I can just click the Save button, and now my changes have been taken. So here, and you see there's my simple param report. It now says simple parameter report for Mike. Go back in. And I have a new SE with me, Amit Harani. Welcome, Amit. He's based in the San Francisco office. And I just want to add his name in here. Save. Click View. And now the update. Go back to the best practices I was talking about. To do those quick iterations without having to go through the publishing and refreshing in the solution repository. So that's my simple report that's been created. Now I want to distribute that report. I have three of those ways. So one is file write a report with PARM. So what I do is go into my file system directory structure, navigate to the temp directory, and I got a bucket in there. So let's just go by date modified and delete the two I tested to make sure it works as any SE should do. And I'm going to write this directly to the file system. So I'm going to go in and execute this action sequence using the alternative prompting interface here, just to put a point across to how this is going to be done. I have the parameters for the report. I have the report name. This is my new report. So that this is live. The directory to go to and the format. And I'm just going to click OK. So if you know the power of an action sequence, you know that this is going to evolve into a lot more that you can do. But this is just simple execution of running that report and writing it directly to the file system. And this is advantage of all the capabilities within the Pentaho BI suite, including the output formats and so forth. So if I go back and I do PDF, click OK, I go back, change this to XLS, click OK. It's going to basically write those report formats for me. And I didn't change the name, so there's report XLS and there's report 1 PDF. Okay, written 10:22 a.m. Okay, give you a nice flavor that you can have an action sequence write directly to the file system. So how that's done? Again, an action sequence can be created to call a PRPT file. Because execution through our extension points or content generators do not require an action sequence. However, if you want to do these types of solutions, you do have to use an action sequence to call the PRPT. So we have a component called report, Pentaho report. All is a couple of parameters, the PRPT, and an output format, and another output content. You can call it my output. I also designated some parameters and directory and format, and that's pretty much it. So this is just an action sequence that calls a PRPT. The output handler now is in the process outputs. Okay, and you can see here I have my output. I change the destination to be file and provide this format to the file system. You'll also notice that I'm using the substitution syntax for parameters. Curly brace, variable input name. Curly brace, variable input name. You can hard code these values, or you can make them parameterize. Take note of the next thing I'm about to say. In order to make these parameters available to the output handler, you must include them as inputs to the report parameters. That's because of the way it parses and it resolves the substitution. So even though I'm not using these report parameters of directory and format or report name within my PRPT, they still need to be part of the action sequence. So you add them in here, and then they will be exposed and translated in here. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, so executing that report through file. Next, we're going to go through FTP. Okay, and then it'll be pretty much the same concept. I have a FTP directory. I have source set up. For those who are interested, I'm running a very simple version of FileZilla FTP server. my source directories, you can see I have shared folder, CFTP, and that's basically going to be my location that I'm going to write to via FTP. Through the Pentaho user console. Oh, and let me backtrack. Again, any of these action sequences can also be executed from action capability. Okay, so you do not have to execute these through the user console. If you want to execute them through what's called our view action content generator, that is part of the integration options we provide. Just wanted to point that out to you. Here's FTP of a report. So I double click this. Again, with the parameters, here I actually put in my username, my password, source directory, format. Don't ask me questions about clear passwords and stuff. That's something we can handle offline. Again, I'm showing you what's possible within this particular handler. Source HTML localhost. I click OK. Takes that report to FTP. Okay, see out of 10:26 a.m. it wrote that report. Let's do it again just to show you that it is real. FTP report. This FTP underscore report 1 PDF. Click OK. And there's my FTP report 1 PDF. Okay, we're writing to the file system. Now we're FTPing. Keep in mind that you could also integrate Pentaho integration into the action sequence and utilize the FTP, SFTP, SSH capabilities of a job. Do something very similar. I'm showing you direct output handlers with the BI platform. We could probably do something in the future for that. To the FTP, same concept, input sources, prompting, a report, defining it in my parameters, and then the output of my report is set up output handler, and now my destination is VFS FTP. Okay, here's the syntax for VFS FTP. Very the way you would access a URL FTP source. Okay. Pause at this point, Doug. I think maybe if you want to take any questions, you want me to continue, because
I'll take some questions right now. I don't have anybody that's directly asking one, but I do want to point out that kind of a use case where this is really powerful is where you've got a series of reports that are possibly linked together, linked together through URLs, but don't necessarily dynamically change throughout a time period. So maybe you've got a process that runs an ETL once a night. You can generate an entire set of HTML reports and FTP them up to a website, and during the day those reports won't have changed anyway. So you kind of are able to post static reports or content out there, and also the same for things that are summarized where maybe they don't change but once a week or once a month. So this is kind of like most of the examples that we always seem to show in our samples are always that, okay, you click on a button, set some parameters, and here's my report. This is a way you would actually populate possibly a directory of related reports. And the same thing for PDFs. If that's the way you're deploying, you can set up a FTP to kind of a library or someplace where you're staging multiple reports for your users.
Thank you, Doug, and that's a good segue to this use case. So for part of my demonstration, prior, I execute this action sequence to show them some of that capability and a use case of actually bursting out different PDF documents. And that use case is also delivery in email. So here I'm actually combining FTP output handlers and email process actions to actually start delivering my profit and loss reports and bursting them into separate files. So here you can see profit and loss reports are ready. Here's your email. Here's where you can access them. Now, obviously, you wouldn't put this clear text in here, but it's just to show you that it can be done. I click this link. It brings me right to my bursted reports right in the directory. And you can see this real time. They're just written into that directory structure. So anything is possible with the BI suite. It really depends on how you want to architect it and the need. You're rarely caught inside the box with Pentaho. Okay, that was combining some of the FTP. Next, we're going to go to email. Since I already told you that there is an easier way, but then this is where you might want to combine different parts of the process and an email component. So again, simple Pentaho report component. Here I'm actually defining a message template just to create a variable based on the file name. Okay, so this is going to actually create a new output variable called report_file name. This is going to give me my attachment. And this allows me to basically name whatever attachment I like. And then use the email output handler. So another component here is send to email. Okay, put that send to email, we can then provide the variable, the from variable, the subject variable, a text message, and HTML message. In this case, it's going to be the output of my report. Okay, so what you can do here is actually take the output. It might not be available in this list, but you can type it in with these braces, and that will actually put the output into the body of the email. And then the attachment uses the report file name output of the message template. Okay. Again, my understanding for this demonstration and discussion is also you have a little familiarity with some of the action sequences that are. So I'm actually defining this output to be used as the attachment name. The output handler, there is a new output handler called content repro. Okay, and you can content repros in my destination. If you do not have content repo, you can add that in the preferences setting under Window, Pentaho Studio, Action Sequence Editor, and then new output destinations area. And you just click on new and type in content repo, and that'll be available here. Iterate, content repo is a new output destination that was introduced with PRP keys and the BI platform. If it's not by default within your Design Studio, you can manually edit it by going to Windows, Window, Preferences, Design Studio, Action Sequence, and then click New under Output Destination. By doing makes it available here, and then that will make it available to write to the internal temp content repository to be picked up for email. And here's my output from the report. Execution of that action sequence. Email a PRPT. We click, it sends it. It gives it, which is the unique ID, global unique ID for the object in the content repository. And then as part of the get mail, here's my report. There's the report in the body, and here's my text message, and here is my attachment. Use cases now, a very simple use case to combining all of this stuff together. Show you when I use email is part of the technique I developed a couple years back called guided ad hoc. Okay, so guided ad hoc, we do another session on this, but just to reiterate, guided ad hoc is a technique. It's not a product. It's basically advanced parameterized reporting using an HTML page that you develop. Part of this output interface that I developed here, let's take output and put it in PDF, and let's limit this data down to, let's just say, the northern region, and then click on my email button and type in Tarallo localhost, and I do an on-demand send technique. On send, it'll take that report and send it to my inbox. Using an action sequence under the covers, there's my analysis report, and there's my PDF. And then my North report. Okay, so this is just giving you a little flavor into combining it into a use case, such as using parameterized HTML-based reporting, integrating with the Pentaho BI suite. So again, guided ad hoc is a technique. This is an HTML interface I developed to basically house parameters. One of those parameters is sending it to an email. I embed rich text editor as part of my application. These are nothing more than parameters being passed to an action sequence. Okay. So it covers emailing the report. And I believe, Doug, with the time we have left, we're at 10:35. I knew this was going to be a rather quick discussion. I don't have anything else other than those that I've showed, we will make these samples available. They will use our sample data source, so you can just plug them in and change it appropriately. Okay, you can take any questions.
Yeah, there was one. When would you use the content repo output destination? Can you explain that in a little more detail?
Yeah. So what happens is for the email component to retrieve the object from the written Pentaho report, what happens is you specify the output handler to be what's called content repo. What that does is write the report object to temporary content repo. It gives it a default global unique ID called a GUID. And then the email component, it sends it. It actually picks that object up from the content repository and sends it along through SMTP. We'd use the content repo when using the email process action.
All right, and I guess that's about the only. Oh. Also wanted to make a note that there's a known issue with having more than one attachment.
Okay.
Just throw that out there. I'm sure that must be something he's working on.
Okay. You know, one of the things that might be interesting or intriguing, I mean, that is possible with Pentaho is also the calling of Pentaho data integration jobs. So just to show you what I did here, in order to send multiple files, an action sequence can kick off a Pentaho data integration job. So you can combine these processes utilizing data integration and Pentaho BI platform. Okay, what I'm going to do here, I guess with the time we do have, let me show you one more thing. And let me execute my data integration. This was another use case that a prospect was interested in using. They wanted to find out how could I write a bunch of reports and then also zip them up and then send them in an email. Well, again, utilizing, exploiting the power of the whole entire suite, I created a job with Pentaho data integration. Okay, so to my BI developers, action samples, and here is my zip up. Find out what it is. That is under action sequence samples, zip up file. Okay, so here's my KJB. All it does is zip up all files from a directory. Keep in mind, this could be completely parameterized, dynamic, substituted at runtime. But here, what I'm doing is grabbing all the PDF files within the Pentaho storage location, and I'm creating a file called storeallfileshere.zip. Okay, so that's really all this job does. To kick off that job with an action sequence. So what combined I showed you, you can have the BI platform write the PDF files to one directory and then issue the data integration job to zip them all up and then use the email component to either pick up or execute another job through Pentaho integration to send them an email, okay, or just keep them zipped up in the directory. And that's a good example of combining the power of the action sequence and data integration as well. And all this is done without coding, because again, I'm not an engineer. I'm pretty good with Pentaho, so I know the Pentaho tools. This is how you can create pretty powerful applications with the tools that we offer from the Pentaho BI suite. Okay, so that's much all I have, Doug.
All right. Well, I know this is kind of a lot to absorb during a presentation like this, so the samples and examples will be available on the recordings page when it is posted. Also, the training guys are coming up with a new Pentaho Architects Bootcamp class for later this summer that also goes through these types of use cases where it's more of a full kind of workflow kind of deal, more than just creating a report and sending it out, but making some decisions, doing logic within an action sequence, combining multiple parts of the platform. So that stuff will also be available. And if there's no more questions, then I'd say that's going to be it for today. Again, I'll be reposting the recording of today's presentation within a day or so on the Community Wiki. And we normally do these community presentations on the first and third Wednesdays of each month. In order to make sure that they're useful, please fill out the short survey that will pop up when you exit the WebEx. And that's it. Goodbye, everybody.
Hey, guys. My pleasure. Bye-bye.